Hi and welcome to the KBF show. We've put together this show today to further the community feel of KBF and to, most importantly, keep the bridge of connection with Simon, the founder of Keep Britain Free, and to put directly the most important points and topics for discussion to him and your questions. So, without further ado, hi Simon. Hello. Firstly, for people who have joined KBF more recently or are just hearing about what we're doing now, could you give a little bit of background to where this came from and, most importantly, where your journey started and why you're here?
Well, yeah, very briefly, I'm a businessman and always have been. In amongst, I've done other things, racing, driving, kickboxing, stuff like that, but predominantly a business person. And I was happily running my businesses and then got impacted, I suppose, in the same way as everybody else did by the Chinese flu, the Wuhan virus, Kung flu, whatever you want to call it. And I was sort of watching from afar what was happening in China, probably like everybody else, not really considering that it was going to impact us in any way. And then we got towards, I think, February time or maybe early March, and I was in London, and London at that point was just starting to close down, and people were stopping shaking hands with one another and all this stupid stuff. And I remember getting home that evening and saying to my wife, I'm sick to death of it. I can't hear anything more about this bloody virus thing. It's ridiculous. And that was, like I say, first week in March. And then the lockdown in the UK started. And honestly, at the time, you could probably forgive them, with what was happening in Italy or what had been reported as happening in Italy. And you think, well, okay, then, 2 weeks, it'll be fine. And like everybody else, it was a bit odd. It was a bit, not really a holiday, but just a bit of a strange thing. And you think, well, a couple of weeks, it'll all be done and that'll be that. And of course, that was 5 months ago or knocking on 6 months ago now. So probably about a month into the 2 week lockdown to save the NHS, I was getting more and more frustrated with it. And I wondered what you could do. And you think, well, we're living in a democracy, so of course there's things you can do. And actually, really, there isn't. Boris got in with an 80 majority. There wasn't going to be a general election. You can't force him out. It's literally, actually, nothing you can do. Other than, I came across an article by a barrister who was saying that he believed that there was potential for a judicial review. A judicial review basically meaning that you take the government to court because you think that they're acting outside of the law. So I got in touch with him. His name's Francis. I got in touch with him, and a week later we'd started the judicial review. And actually, initially, it was purely a personal project, really. I was going to just fund it, and we'd take the government to court, and we'd win, and that'd be that. I was expecting it to go on for maybe 3 or 4 weeks or something. And then the press got hold of it, and a few people wanted to donate, and so we put the Crowd Justice site up. And then the press got more interested in it, and then it just went sort of ballistic from there. And then I found myself surprisingly, I wouldn't say unwillingly, but surprisingly kind of heading up this organisation, which now has become, I guess, really quite important. So that was how I ended up here, really, but completely by accident, but actually really glad I did it. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of nice finding something that you can do that's a bit bigger than you are and isn't about money for a change.
Excellent, thank you. And could you explain a little bit more about what the process of a judicial review actually is? Because we know that you've already had a video initial hearing, and we know that you now have an appeal. But what does that actually mean in terms of the process? What does the timeline look like? What can the people who've donated money and supported you, or who are watching this, what can we expect that sort of process to actually look like? Oh,
we've seen what the process did look like. So, like I say, judicial review is essentially the people. It's actually the Queen on behalf of the people, which is quite interesting. Taking the government to court because you believe that they're acting outside of the law. So that was what we did, and the case is all very front end loaded, and so almost all of the work gets done before you actually submit papers to the court. So our evidence runs to 1,200 pages. So there's a huge amount of work that's been done. And then obviously the government can counter that and put their arguments in and so on. But the culmination of the first thing was that we got in front of a judge, and because of all the restrictions, it was done via a video link, but otherwise exactly the same as it would have been in court. And the judge heard the evidence, or more to the point, the judge didn't really hear the evidence because he wasn't particularly interested in it. He said, I'm a legal man, I'm only interested in the law, and the government can do whatever they want within the law, so that's that. And that was kind of the hearing. It went on for a day, and he gave his judgment, but it was a bit sort of whitewashed, and so we decided to appeal, and we did. We put the appeal in within a couple of days. And the appeal court judge looked at it and said, no, this is really important.
Right.
He said something along the lines of, these are the biggest restrictions on ever imposed in legal history, in UK legal history. So we really do need to look at this, and it raises a lot of important questions about the power of the government and the role of the judiciary and so on. So these were really encouraging words.
Yeah.
And so he's now given us the appeal, which will be heard on the 28th, 29th of September. And will no doubt go on after that. But that's the next big thing that will happen.
And so far, what have you achieved? What has this campaign achieved? For example, the Sage Minutes. How did that come about? How have you actually gone about making real change and impact?
Well, the interesting thing is that obviously when we brought the judicial review, everybody was in lockdown. No one was releasing any information, even though they said they were. They really weren't. So what we went in on initially was we wanted to, I think it was get the schools open, release the Sage Minutes, and have gatherings up to 20 people or something. Because you have to offer a resolution to the court.
Of course.
You know? Yeah. So that was what we did, and the government said no, we're not releasing the Sage Minutes, and the rest of it. They were quite silent on the schools matter, and the gatherings far too dangerous, can't do that. So we argued and argued and argued, and then eventually, all of a sudden, the Sage Minutes got released.
Yeah.
They didn't say it was because of us, but evidently it was because of us, because otherwise they wouldn't have released them, because they said they weren't going to. And then when you read through the Sage Minutes, you can see how utterly people have been manipulated. You know, what the real, I hesitate to use the word agenda, but what, you know, the real thinking and psychology behind some of the messaging that they were putting out. So that was a really interesting win. And then when we got to court and we said about the schools being closed, the opposing barrister, Sir James Eadie, who's top barrister, he's worked for the government for years, he said, well, the schools have never been closed.
Wow.
And well, sorry?
Yeah.
Boris is on tape saying we're closing the schools. Everybody, Gavin Williams is on tape saying we're closing the schools. Yeah. No, we never closed the schools. And even the judge sort of said, the judge said, well, so if I was a head teacher, and I just phoned up my staff and phoned up the children and said, well, we're open, could I have done that? And James Eadie sort of shuffled a bit. It's, well, yes, absolutely, you could have done that.
Wow.
And it was at that point when I thought, we're not playing fair here.
Yeah.
This is just ludicrous. So that was a big win, because obviously the press picked up that, and that really that was the start of blowing the whole thing wide open, I guess. So they were two quite nice wins there.
Yeah, which actually leads us very nicely onto the sort of main topic of the week. Obviously, we're at the beginning of September, the time of year that kids are normally sort of facing going back to school, this time with very different apprehensions and things going on in their minds than they've ever had to sort of think about before. We've got the front page of the newspapers today, which you can quite clearly see some interesting pictures of Boris Johnson in a school uniform, which I never thought I wanted to see. How do you feel with where we are now? Obviously, schools have reopened. Boris Johnson seems to be very much behind the back to school, get the children back into education. We are, you know, a country that values the education system and you know, the youth of today. Where are we now? Where do you see us now? And what are your perhaps concerns and hopes for the future in terms of where we are now?
It's really quite interesting because, going back just a second to the SAGE minutes, within those SAGE minutes, the psychologists were saying we really need hard-hitting messaging to make sure that people are scared.
Yeah.
That was essentially what they've said. This isn't contentious, this is not a theory, this is actually there in black and white, you can go and see them. So I think what you have now is that, yes, the politicians would love the kids to go back to school, but the unions and some of the teachers driven by the unions, and genuinely some of the teachers themselves and some parents are saying, well, hang on a minute, like last week you were telling us it was a pandemic and we couldn't go to school and it was all awful and people were dying, and now you're just saying, well, no, go back to school, it's great.
Yeah.
How can we possibly do this? So the government being the government are then sort of appeasing the newspapers, the unions, and parents and head teachers and so on, and saying, well, yes, we need you to get back to school, but maybe we could have, and this is the government, bubbles, face masks, I don't know, testing, all this rubbish.
Yeah.
What they should have been saying equivocally is saying there is not one single recorded case in the entire world of a child getting this thing, you're perfectly safe. And that's what they should be saying. But they haven't. And so now you have this ludicrous situation where on the one hand they're saying, yes, kids have to go back to school.
Yeah.
And we don't recommend they wear face masks, even though they said that they did, and then they said that they didn't, and then they said that they did again. So you get all these mixed messages, and I'm seeing loads of letters coming from schools that I get sent.
Yeah.
Basically saying, well, to be on the safe side, kids have to wear masks, they have to be in bubbles, there's going to be distance learning, the teachers can't be in the same room, and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of parents who are just going, well, sod it, I'm not sending my kids back to that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. In fact, we haven't, And then, but on the flip side, the government said there's going to be fines if you don't turn up.
Yeah.
And if you test positive, not even test positive, if you cough in class, you're going to be put in isolation, and then your parents are going to have to come and pick you up, and then you're going to have to be in quarantine for 14 days, which screws everybody's lives up because the parents are probably working.
Yeah.
So you have these massive, unintended consequences of basically just them over-egging the pudding to start with, and now being very wet in trying to get out of it and just trying to appease everybody like politicians doing, and in the end they don't appease anybody and just make more of a mess of it. So what are my hopes? My hopes are that people go back to school, the teachers realise that the kids are throwing the masks all over the place, the teachers get fed up with it, the head teacher gets fed up with angry letters from people, and it just drifts off, and then eventually by Christmas they go, it's all finished now, you can go back as normal. And then people will, because it's become habitual to go back to school again. That's what I hope.
Where actually does the law stand, and where does the responsibility lie from somebody reading the news and seeing these letters from the school? It's incredibly ambiguous as to where the power lies. Is it mandatory to wear the face masks in communal areas when travelling about the school, for example? Who enforces that? Is that coming down from the government? Is it coming down from the school? And how then do we potentially fight back to that?
Well, it's down to the schools.
Okay.
And really, it's up to them to decide how they want to implement their risk. So, they're looking after children, and quite rightly, they have to do risk assessments. They have to do a risk assessment over COVID. So, in the past, presumably, when the flu season was going around, you didn't have bubbles and temperature checks and masks and all the rest of it. And the flu season is every bit as, actually more contagious for children. So you would have thought that their risk assessments that they would have done over various other diseases would apply to this one. So the risk assessment is actually there's no risk at all to the kids. There's almost no risk to the teachers. In fact, I think no risk to the teachers. And so therefore there is no need for us to do this thing. They have to do their health and safety thing, but that's what they should be doing. The flip side of it is, if they're insisting on bubbles and masks and this and that and the other, they have to do a risk assessment for that as well, because that affects children psychologically.
Yeah. And
I can guarantee that none of them have done it. And I know that because lots of parents have written to schools asking to see copies of their risk assessment, and they haven't got them. So no, the government are doing this typical thing. Well, we're just recommending, but we're leaving it up to the schools to decide, which is a complete... They're trying to absolve themselves of any responsibility whatsoever, because they can just turn around and say, well, no, Schools are open, businesses are open, everything's fantastic. It's not our fault if you can't run your business properly or your school properly. So, yeah, absolutely. And in terms of what you can do, the parents need to get together. They need to write to the school and basically say, we're not wearing masks, we're not wearing face shields, kids need to go back as normal. If not, we're not sending the kids to school. And then let the government try and find them.
Yeah.
And then we come up with a test case.
Yeah. And teachers and schools themselves, what would your advice be to them if they're seeing this and have their eyes open to what we're talking about? What can they do against this?
No, the teachers need to drive this as well. I've not had any messages at all from teachers or head teachers that have said you're wrong, i.e. I'm wrong, and there's a really big risk, and we're going to be wearing masks. Not one single one. I have had dozens and dozens and dozens of teachers saying, we just want to get back to normal. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I would just urge the teachers and the head teachers to you haven't got any obligation whatsoever to do this stuff. Do a risk assessment. If you consider that the risk to the children and the teachers is really extremely low, which it is, if not negligible, then you don't have to have these things.
Yeah.
You don't have to have masks. You just get back to learning as normal. And there are plenty of schools that are doing that. Plenty of schools.
Yeah. It would be really interesting, I think, if we were maybe to put up on the website, some of the hero stories. I think it certainly encourages people to see when others are standing up and when the voices that are being heard are making a difference, because I think that that's actually something that is quite inspirational about Keep Britain Free, and certainly speaks to people like me, parents, people who aren't particularly politically motivated in any way, but see the day-to-day harms that are happening as a result of the measures that are put in place. So in terms of the psychological and physical implications, have you many sort of statistics or stories on, the psychological and physiological harm that could potentially be a backlash of children wearing masks in schools, of the social distancing and the implications of what we're actually enforcing upon children in schools?
Well, I don't think there are any studies, because it's never happened before. People could point to Asia where they've been wearing masks and so on, but they don't have to sit in bubbles and all the rest of it. So this is like some mad science experiment. How do you break kids? How do you kept them apart from their friends for the last 5 or 6 months, and now you've terrified them with images of people dying and hospitals being overrun. You're making them wear masks, you're making them sit in bubbles, they can't play sport. I would imagine, just purely from a common sense point of view, that the psychological damage is probably, it will be great for some, and we know that suicide rates have gone through the roof. I think it's tenfold. Yeah. So it doesn't come without its risks, and for a government that, a society actually, that over the course of the last few years has been banging on about mental health so much, so publicly. Yeah. But then do this, I think is criminal. There's two big things that are going to come out of this, I believe. If we look just from a health point of view, the first story will be the care homes, and that's an absolute travesty. That's a huge story that is going to come out over the years. And secondly, the psychological damage to children. Yeah. And I absolutely 100% guarantee that there's going to be a new condition that psychologists and psychiatrists will be noting in the next couple of years, which will be lockdown syndrome, COVID phobia, or something like that. How many kids are going to get agoraphobia now because they've been locked in and so on? So massive psychological damage, but it's not the sort of thing that you could have a peer-reviewed double-blind study, because you're not allowed to abuse kids by doing it. So you just have to kind of wait and see, tragically.
A lived experiment. Yeah. So you seem incredibly confident when you keep referring to there being sort of no recorded cases of transmission in the school environment, etc. The statistics that you've sort of put out on Twitter and social media over the months has certainly been quite eye-opening. Very recently, the CDC has come out and said that 94% of all Americans who've died of COVID actually died with, 1, 2, 3 underlying diseases, all of which with very life-limiting conditions that would very soon have been the end of life anyway. Do you think that we are seeing the tides change somewhat in the way that the media are reporting this and the general public are receiving this? Are we seeing that difference come through to the mainstream a little more?
Yeah, I mean, every day there appears to be more and more stories in the press that are, if you like, on our side. I would say the truth, but I think it's really on our side. Yesterday, the Sun, not traditionally a paper that would go against the government, ran a big story that said you've got a 1 in 2 million chance of dying of COVID,
Yes.
and there's only 44 cases per million, and
Yes.
and so on. And when you see stories like that, the Telegraph have been particularly strong. So I would say probably there's 1 or 2 stories a day coming out in most of the mainstream about the fact that this now isn't anything. It probably never was anything in terms of numbers really. When I started, everything was against it.
Yeah.
Everything was the world is going to end. Everybody's going to die of it. It's terrible. We all need to be locked up. So there's been a massive swing, massive.
The next thing that we're going to go on to really are kind of direct questions from the community that have been submitted through the forum. So we have quite a little bit of a range. One that I find very interesting and has actually been put to us by a couple of different people is, why are MPs, you may or may not know this, it's just an interesting discussion to have, why are MPs in the House of Commons not wearing face masks during parliamentary sessions?
Well, because it's not obligatory in the workplace.
Okay.
That's the argument to that, and I think it's a really interesting point, because it was a little bit like the Dominic Cummings thing. Everybody wanted to have a go at him because he was breaking the ridiculous lockdown rules by driving to the pharmaceutical company headquarters. Yeah. And you think, well, yeah, that there is something about that seems very hypocritical, and indeed, of course, it is hypocritical. Yeah. But if you argue that Cummings shouldn't have been out and that MP should be wearing face masks, then you're tacitly approving of what it is that you're fighting against. So I think we have to be very careful about pulling people up and saying, you should be wearing face masks when we're saying you shouldn't. Yeah. So I get the argument, and the argument is from hypocrisy.
Yes, absolutely.
But it isn't from any kind of. I think we need to choose battles carefully, and I think what we should be doing is celebrating the fact that MPs aren't wearing face masks. Yeah. Look, if you're not wearing them, why should kids be wearing them? It's far more that than going, you should be doing this or you should be doing that.
And actually I think that is generally the consensus within the forums and within the community, that people are saying, actually, it's the hypocrisy, absolutely. And if you're not, we shouldn't, and you shouldn't enforce it upon us. So I think that's definitely the point that they were making. And yes, let's, as you say, let's celebrate it and say, hey, if it's good enough for you, then it's got to be good enough for our kids, really. This one's a very interesting one, and I think it opens us up a little more to discuss the stance of KBF and potentially not being labelled as conspiracy theorists. So bear with me, but people are asking if you believe that there is a larger agenda here, and if so, kind of what is it, and where does KBF stand on the whole agenda conspiracy spectrum?
It's a really good question, and some days you find yourself getting dragged down there, because I fail to see that people could be that incompetent that they're doing what they're doing. So you sometimes you play devil's advocate and you say, well, is it just that they're incompetent and trying to cover their own asses, or is there something more sinister going on? I certainly don't think that this was a planned, from start to finish. We release a virus, we lock people up for 2 weeks, but then we carry on. If you look at all those steps, I think that would be difficult, especially worldwide. It would be difficult to say that was. I've never met anybody well, I've never met anybody bright in politics for a start, and I've met a lot. But I've never met anybody that bright who could pull something like that off and who could coordinate worldwide. Yeah. Obviously, there's a couple of outliers, but really not many. So I don't actually think that it was this massive planned, coordinated event with all of the different ramifications that could come from that. I do believe that they're taking advantage of the situation that they find themselves in to roll out things that potentially wouldn't have been palatable beforehand. Yeah. ID cards were mooted yesterday, so that's a good point. Vaccinations, obviously, it's another massive topic that if they would have suggested, having a massive flu vaccination 12 months ago, people would have said, I'll have it or I won't have it, but you're not going to tell me what to do. Yeah. So now, obviously, they're pushing, well, you can only go back to stadiums if you have a jab, you can only do this, you can only do that. So I think they're taking advantage of it. I think they're covering their asses. I think they're protecting their own jobs. I think they're woefully incompetent, cowardly, and in it for themselves, They haven't got no politician has got our best interests at heart. Yeah. Let's face it, they're interested in their own jobs and their own security first, and then anything else from there on in. So that's where I stand on it. There's a million, really interesting conspiracy theories out there, some of which will undoubtedly become true because conspiracy theories do. Out of every 7 or 8, there's 2 or 3 that come true, I guess, and you only look back in history. Yeah. In fact, I did do that. You type in, top 10 conspiracy theories that have come true, and lo and behold, there's loads of them. Mm-hmm. So something will come out, for sure, in the dim and distant future, I guess. But at the moment, I'm more interested in concentrating on what we can actually achieve, rather than trying to figure out what it is that's led up to this point.
A lot of people are asking, do face masks actually work? Why has science... apparently, the scientists and the advisors and the government, why this change? Why do you believe that this change has occurred? And is there any statistics in either direction? I think people are wanting reassurance that actually, we are saying send your kids to school without a face mask. I think people are actually looking for a bit of reassurance. Where are these statistics? Where are the actual numbers? Yes, there's a lot of advice. There's a lot of conflicting advice. Where are the numbers? Where are the statistics?
I think there are any. I literally don't think there are any. The face masks. In April, categorically across the world, everybody was saying, and every study that had been done up until that point was basically saying face masks don't stop the spread of respiratory illnesses. And it's been done before, 2016, 2008, whenever these things come up, they look at it and they don't. If face masks work, you would argue, well, why on earth did China get their cases? Because they wear them all the time because of the pollution. So you can look at it just from a common sense point of view. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, when it got to, when the whole thing had almost completely disappeared, they're saying we should wear face masks. Well, okay then, let's go down that. Let's go down the route of if face masks did work. Well, what are they actually protecting you from? Because there are no cases, there's no deaths anymore at all. Yeah. The cases are around about 10 in 100,000 or something. And if you get it, even if you get that thing, that really rare respiratory illness, you're not going to die of it. Yeah. And I think when they, the only thing that they can come up with in terms of the efficacy of a face covering, because obviously it's not masks, you can just wrap an old T-shirt around your head. And I thought that was a joke that somebody had mocked up on a government website, but it actually really is how to make your own out of a T-shirt. Yeah. You can Google it. It's on the government site. So the only thing that they're saying on that is well, if you wear a covering over your face, then if you were to sneeze or cough, you would sneeze or cough into that cloth rather than presumably sneezing or coughing all over the person that stood next to you. Well, my argument to that would be, first of all, you probably haven't got it. You've got a 10 in 100,000 chance of having this thing anyway. Secondly, are you really the sort of person that would stand and sneeze and cough over the person that stood next to you? And thirdly, if you are that sort of person, would you all of a sudden change your behaviour? You're that antisocial.
Yeah.
Would you change your behaviour and say, well, I was going to sneeze all over her yesterday, but I'm going to put a cloth around my face just in case I do? It's utterly nonsensical. So that's where I stand on face masks. They're just nothing. They're either, one, a placebo to make people feel better, or two, a constant reminder that you need to be vigilant, for this thing that's hiding around the corner. Either way, they're just terrible.
Which actually equally leads on very nicely to a few people who have said that you can't be in France without wearing a face mask, you can't go out, you can't do this. I bet Simon sticks one on as he goes out his front door. Knowing you as I do, I would probably say you've never put one on. Is that correct?
No, you're wrong. I actually put one on once in Monaco. So in Monaco, you're not allowed in a shop unless you wear a face mask. And I was walking the dogs. My wife phoned me and said you need to pick up a baguette from the boulangerie. So I had no choice. I had to go in, and I went in, and they said, "No, you have to wear a mask. You have to wear a mask." So I put a mask on, bought my baguette, went out, and I felt dirty afterwards, and never wore one. And that was it. I resolved. So I actually haven't been into a shop since then, which was May, I think. So and I wouldn't wear one. I've been on planes and not worn one, and so on. And no one seems to care, really. Probably people are unlikely to pick on me anyway, I guess. But yeah, no, I wouldn't wear one. I have a pathological hate of them, and I did think about why I hate them so much, and I think it's probably symbolic.
Yeah.
It's literally someone telling you to cover your face up, and I find that. I would rather be told to wear a yellow hat on a Tuesday by the government. You might do that. If you had to wear a yellow hat to go into a shop, maybe you do that. But covering your face up, there's something more.
Interestingly, as a business owner, I know it's my choice whether to make people wear masks or not in my establishment, which we don't. But in terms of people like dentists and doctors, can they refuse? Somebody here in the forum says, can they refuse to see my children or I if we don't wear a mask? Can doctors or dentists refuse somebody treatment if they refuse to wear a mask? Do you know the answer to that question?
Yes, I do. Obviously, they can refuse treatment.
Okay.
But by doing so, they're breaking the law.
Really? Okay.
The Equalities Act 2010, so they're actually discriminating against people with a disability. The disability being the fact that you suffer stress by wearing a mask. So, yeah, you could quite happily sue them.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, whether you would want to go down that route, you see, it's all very well me saying these things, because it wouldn't be me that would be having a row with a person in the shop. Yeah, I'd be quite happy to, but in these circumstances, it wouldn't be. And my advice really would be stand up for yourself. Just tell the people that. But if it's important, if your kid's got toothache or you've got something wrong with you, or you need to go to a doctor or dentist, find another doctor or dentist, because there will be someone that will do it. Yeah. Rather than getting, don't cut off your nose to spite your face, I suppose is what I'm saying. There's plenty of other people who can have that fight. So don't put that above your health or your comfort of your children.
That's excellent point. Because the lady actually who's asked that question said that her doctor refuses to see her as he believes my reason is not good enough. My personal emotional reasons, as per the government website, do not seem to be enough for my doctor, who has refused her and her children treatment as a result.
Well, whoever that person is, if they just send us a message in,
and
then we'll take the doctor up on it. If she wants to get involved, we can take a test case.
Right.
There's lots that are going around at the moment. So that's just, for a doctor to refuse someone treatment is really off. I mean, that's well, first of all, it breaks the Hippocratic Oath, if that's still even a thing. I think it is. But secondly, it is. It's not up to him to decide whether her reason is good enough.
Yeah.
No, that's quite clear.
We'll get in touch with her. And see if she'd like us to help her pursue that. Excellent. So, just really, somebody asking, what does KBF mean to you personally now? Where you are now on the journey, what does it mean to you?
That's a good question. I suppose it's a heavy weight of responsibility. Yeah, there are a lot of people that are really vested in this and are really, you could tell that there's a lot of people that actually their health probably relies on us getting a good result or getting some wins.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of responsibility. That's probably how I feel about it. Responsible in a good way. I'm really happy to take it on. I like things. I like a fight, especially when you're on the right side. So responsibility and some pride, I guess. It's nice to be able to feel as though you're doing something that's good.
Perfect. And there something that actually is quite a scary concept. Apparently, there's an imminent vote on the 25th of September to extend the Coronavirus Act 2020. Is that something that you and your team are sort of aware of? Is that something that we're sort of fighting? Is that something that's likely to come into effect? Obviously, it is a topic that's come up a couple of times in the community forums. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of people getting quite excited about it, and trying to galvanise MPs to vote against it and so on. And whilst it would be great if MPs voted against it and they got rid of the coronavirus bill or act, it's not going to change anything particularly, because the draconian measures that they bring in, the lockdowns and so on, are all under the Public Health Act 1984. So the coronavirus bill doesn't get used for much, and it was quite a nice little. A neat little trick by the government to throw this thing out and say, well, we're just going to, every 6 months we'll review it. Yeah, you're reviewing that, but the Public Health Act, you review that every 2 years. So that's where I stand on that. It's a little bit of it's not a little bit of a scam, it's a complete scam on the government's part. So vote for it, don't vote for it. It's not actually going to make any difference. And pound to a penny, that will get voted in again probably by 620 to 30 or something like that in Parliament.
And lastly, really, thank you for staying with us so long, Simon. We've got through an awful lot today, but where do you see this going next, and what can people do to help further the KBF campaign, and how can we get involved further in either our communities or as a movement as a whole?
It's taking the personal responsibility to just spread the message about, and it's not it's not a contentious message particularly, or it shouldn't be when you look at the numbers, and if it's that old thing, if we get 5 people that tell 5 people that tell 5 people, pretty soon, and all we need to do is to shift the majority to believing that face masks on kids are wrong, and then the rest of the people will fall in line. The press will fall in line. That's why it's really important. That's why we do this, the media email that we do every day, and hopefully people go on and comment on those stories, because the way the media works is that their journalists are judged on how many clicks the stories get. So if you write a story that says 1 million people are going to die tomorrow of COVID, you're going to get a load of clicks on that story. Yeah. You'll lose your credibility, but you will get a lot of clicks on the story. Whereas if you have a story that says nobody died of COVID yesterday, people will go, great, and they won't read it.
Yeah.
So you always have to remember that the bad news is going to get an awful lot more press than the good news. And so therefore that's how you end up with this horribly skewed view of the world. And that's always been the same, to be fair. So I think by clicking on the stories that are positive, and there are some, by commenting on the stories that are positive, and by commenting on the stories that are negative, you'll see these the comments that it's quite bizarre. So you'll have a story about COVID, and then seemingly of the 500 comments, 490 seem to be agreeing with the government.
Yeah.
Which we all know is complete rubbish, because there's on no topic do they go. But of course, these are paid agents. These are from the 77th Brigade. Again, it's not a conspiracy. They are there, and this is what they do. And this is what we're fighting against. But there's 3,000 of them. There's a lot more of us. There's 100,000 of us or something. So we can push the media into the way of printing stories that are good for us rather than good for the government.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Simon. And hopefully people at home will like this and we'll do this again. Thank you very much.
I look forward to it.
Cheers. As well as hearing from us, we want to know what matters to you. So Leah is out in the community finding out.
Yeah. So thanks very much for chatting with us. Wonder if I could ask you what you feel about mask wearing.
Well, today I've got a great experience for you. 2 of our staff went home because they were wearing them.
Because? So what
Well,
happened?
one got a mouth infection from wearing it. The other one got sort of a serious bacterial problem from it and had to go home.
Oh wow.
So I don't think they're health-wise beneficial for us. And I don't think, as we've been told over and over again, they're actually of any benefit to prevent the spread. So that's my opinion.
Yeah,
So
and have you done any research on this, or are you sort of...
only on the internet,
Yeah,
various sites and things like that, yeah. So
yeah.
I've had a look at it.
So as a, am I allowed to mention your business?
Yeah, you can
Yes,
do
that has a hairdresser. You own a hairdresser's. So as you've said, you've got a couple of staff that have already suffered. They're suffering with their health, and I actually personally have a friend who's also had a terrible bacterial infection as a result of wearing a mask. So clearly that is a concern. And you, as you already said, you know that they've said for months and months and months, there's just no point to it. The virus will escape through and out, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
It's going to make it more complicated for people. So we're not going to do that. And then to suddenly say they're going to do it, and that impact your business and reopening.
It's impacted our business greatly. In the beginning, before the mask wearing, we had a great return of clients, record numbers of people came in. When they introduced a compulsory or mandatory mask wearing, it dried right up.
Wow.
So we really suffered, and it's just starting to come back. I think people are not enjoying the experience. It's supposed to be a luxury item, and then if you're sat there masked up, you can't understand, and you can't read people's thoughts or emotions. You're looking at their eyes, aren't you? You can't see what's going on, so it isn't great in any way.
Does your daughter feel stressed about what's going on, do you think?
How do you feel about it? You know about it, don't you? You know why people wear masks, but you don't want to get it, do you? Which is why you always wash your hands when we go in shops, don't you? And you have to do that when you go to school. Well, yeah. Yeah. You know you can't hug your friends when you see them on Monday. Yeah.
On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
No, you can't hug them any day, can you?
So how do you feel? Mummy's explained it to you. How do you feel?
How does it make you feel?
Sad.
Sad?
Sad.
Why?
Because I miss all my friends.
Because you miss all your friends and you can't hug them when you see them. You can't play like you used to. Everything's changed for you, hasn't it?
All I see is scared people. They're not using this. They're using what the media is saying to them.
Yep.
Use your brain. Look at the coronavirus. People die every year, elderly people after Christmas. How many extra people have died?
Yeah.
Not too many.
No.
But yet the news is telling us we should be all walking around blooming scared. It doesn't scare me.
Yeah. So how do you get your information then? How do you know what you know about the fact that the figures are actually lower than what the
I
media
don't
is
get it
suggesting?
from BBC News.
No.
And it's the same old garbage all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to die tomorrow.
Yeah.
I look at the economy, what's happening, and I look at all those who are milking the system because they do not go to work because the government is having to supply them with this money all the time. England must get back to work again because the economy has just gone down to the pits.
Yeah.
Start thinking with your head.
Yeah. Well done, you.
Well, it's not well done me. Start thinking.
Yeah.
Don't walk around, I'm scared, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
I'm not going to die.
No.
I'll die if I do something stupid, if I commit suicide, drink too much wine, or take too many drugs. But
You're not scared of a virus.
why would I be scared? I'm not going to get it. I've never had a flu injection. I've had it once in my life, and 20 years ago, and I'd never have it again. I'm fed up every day with the media. All it is, they're milking the system because they got no good news.
Yeah.
And all they're doing is giving us this rotten news.
Are you aware of what SAGE have said about how the media have been used? Do you know much about SAGE? SAGE committee who advised government.
I think they're all a joke, actually. Look at Dominic Cummings. Did he really believe in this? He was flying all over the place where we were telling them to sit down like puppy dogs. Would I believe a word that any of those people are saying?
Yeah.
No way.
So you object to being told what to do by the government?
I don't object. I'm a realist.
Yeah.
And if it suits me and I think it's real,
Yeah.
not nonsense, then I will do.
Okay. So,
I'm not led like a moron. I have a brain to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to go back to work.
So would you be happy if everybody just threw the masks away? And said,
No,
"Right,
no,
we're not
no,
doing
no,
that"?
no, no, no. Some people have diabetes if they're very overweight and, you know, don't do an awful lot in blood conditions and that. That's up to them to do what they want to do. It's up to me what I want to do.
So you want autonomy, your own choices.
I have my own choices. I've always had my own choices. I'm not led like a moron.
Yeah.
This is called Great Britain. Where's all the great people?
Well, I agree with Rose. We have to get back to work.
Of course they do. They're
And
milking the
I
system.
agree. I think a lot of people have taken
Advantage of
taken
it.
total advantage
Of course they have.
being at home and not wanting to go to work. And I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
We've got to go back to work.
If not this year, coming year, but maybe next year in 2021, if we were heading into the winter and we started to see that, oh dear, we've got bad flu season, which we've had many of.
Yes, we have.
2017 and 18, there was 55,000 people died.
Yeah.
So we've seen this before. Would you then start to say, well, I'm going to wear my mask? Would you repeat that, do you think?
She's already wearing it all the
I'm
time.
wearing it. Well, my daughter and my son, they keep, Mum, you must wear a mask, you must wear a mask. Because they're worried about something happening to me. So
Yeah.
probably as much as to please them, as much as anything else, yeah.
Yeah.
It make they feel,
My kid's the same. When's
Yeah,
the old
yeah,
woman
you're
going
fine
to
to
go?
make the
And,
same,
you know,
yeah.
we had to get her money.
yeah. So I probably would do
It's
it, yeah.
like Nazi
would.
Germany
Yeah, I
now.
probably would. But even though you've never done it before,
Everybody
you
is losing it because
I think by then maybe
the government is saying, like in Nazi Germany, you must, we are both. And no one is thinking, they're all so bloomin' scared.
Thank you for watching. Remember to visit keepbritainfree.com, like, subscribe and leave your comments below. Join the forums, have your say and get involved.